Hi, I'm Ben. Today I've got a book haul to share. I've got about 40 books that have come into my possession over the last 3 months or so. Although, to my shame, quite a few of these I have acquired just in the last 2 weeks. And those of you who watch the channel regularly may remember that 2 weeks ago, in a video that is published on the internet, I loudly and proudly declared no more books before the end of the year. Well, it turns out I'm completely weak-willed. And I do console myself with the fact that it could be worse. It could be drugs that I'm spending my money on. But there is still a limit. And so, yeah, there's a little smidgen of shame, but not too much because books are great. The other exonerating factor is that of this pile of books that you can't yet see, I think only like 10 of them are books I've paid full price for, and even then I've used like some vouchers and stuff when I bought them, because the rest of the books are either from charity shops, and I've had a really good time rooting around in charity shops and finding some real steals. To be clear, didn't steal, but they have cost me between like 50p and £2, and the money goes to charity, so I do not feel bad about buying books from charity shops. And then I've also got a few books that publishers have very kindly sent me or given me. I'm going to organise this video into a few buckets of books so it's a bit more manageable and I can put chapters and stuff in. And the first of those are the books that I picked up when I went to the Booktuber meetup at the end of September, where Katie Lumsden, who is an author and booktuber on the channel Books and Things, I will link to her channel below, she got a bunch of us together and we all met up in York. And I've never been to York before. It was really nice to go up there and see like this beautiful old city. And we just had a pootle around. We went from bookshop to bookshop having a chat. We went for lunch. Some of us were staying over as well, and so we went for dinner. And I just had a really lovely time. It was great to catch up with everyone, see people in person, because you spend so much time just like talking to yourself in videos. And so to talk to other people whose videos you have watched and you've always wanted to like reply to something that they're talking about in their videos, that was just really lovely. I was very poor at documenting anything from the day, but a few other booktubers have created vlogs out of the day, which were really lovely to look back at. So I will link to a couple of those that I can find in the description, but I'll also link to all of the channels of the people who were there. The first book I got at the meetup was one that was thrust into my hands before I'd even had a chance to look at any bookshelves or buy anything for myself, and that's because the lovely Charlie Brooke from Charlie Brooke Reads gifted me a Fitzcarraldo. She gave me The Private Lives of Trees by Alejandro Zambra, translated from Spanish by Megan McDowell, and she didn't really get on with this, I don't think, but suspected that I might. And this is great because I've heard really good things about Zambra. I've been wanting to read a novel of his for quite some time, and this is a tiny little one, so it'd be a good introduction. This, I believe, is about a man whose wife doesn't come home and he doesn't know where she is, and to pass the time and stop his daughter from worrying, he makes up a story to tell her, and that leads him into some rumination about his entire life and his relationships. Sounds quite interesting, and I'll be intrigued to sample Zambra's prose. Then in the Little Apple bookshop, which was this really cute little bookshop that had a really good selection, I picked up Our Evenings by Alan Hollinghurst. I have still not read a Hollinghurst. I've heard amazing things about this. I did hear someone say that this might be his final novel, and I don't know where that came from because I can't find any evidence of that online, but maybe it is, and maybe he said that in an interview. But I absolutely love the cover, and this was the signed independent bookshop edition, so it's got his signature inside. It's also got a ribbon, which I always love to see in a nice edition of a book. And I just think the cover is beautiful. Like, it's such a 80s throwback. It feels like a ready-made classic. And I know Roro Reads didn't love it, but I generally have heard very good things about this. And it's definitely on my radar for next year's Booker Prize. So I am very much looking forward to reading this. It might be one that I tackle early in the new year, I think. Something to sort of ease me into a year of great reading. Oh yeah, I haven't said what it's about. It's about an actor called Dave Wynn. I think it covers multiple decades of his life. I think he's reflecting on the fact that his friend has died. I think it's gay. All sounds like catnip to me. Really looking forward to it. Then we went to another indie bookshop called Criminally Good Books, which focuses mainly on crime fiction. And although I'm not a big reader of crime fiction, I did have a browse, and it turned out their selection actually cast the net a little bit wider. And so I found a couple of books that I was really interested in reading. First is Human Acts by Han Kang, translated from Korean by Deborah Smith. And this is one of the new reissues that Granta have just put out following the Nobel Prize in Literature win. And I just think they're really stunning. I think this one in particular, I love the most out of the three that they have published. I just think that paint splodge is so striking. I have recently read The Vegetarian and I didn't love it. I do still need to review it in an upcoming wrap up. But I've heard that this book is her best one, despite The Vegetarian being the one that won the International Booker. I don't know much about it and I kind of don't want to. I've heard that it breaks you. And you know what? I kind of like being broken. So whenever you see a video of me looking like an emotional husk, then maybe it'll be just after I've read this. The other one I got from Criminally Good Books was Pink Slime by Fernanda Trias, translated from Spanish by Heather Cleary. This has recently been nominated for the National Book Award for Translated Fiction. I can't remember if it made the shortlist or not, but it's just been published in the smaller format in the UK. And I really like, I don't know if I can capture this. Oh yeah, look, the way it's iridescent on the spot gloss. I think that's really cool. This is about a city in an ecological crisis. There's some toxic wind going on. I'm really intrigued by the premise. I believe that it's more cerebral and introspective than it is action filled, and a lot of people were expecting dystopian action. So consider my expectations managed, and I'm looking forward to diving into it. After the indie bookshops, we went to a number of different charity shops, and there was gold to be found in them hills. The first one we went to was the Oxfam bookshop, and I had a nice time really just chatting with Bob and Roz from Scallylandlin about the books. We were sort of browsing through the shelves and talking about the books we've read and liked and recommended to each other. The one that I ended up picking up though was the start of a reading project, and I guess book buying project that I didn't know I was making a start on. That was Peter Carey's True History of the Kelly Gang. Peter Carey is twice winner of the Booker Prize. This is one of the books that won it for him, and I think what this has sort of sparked in me is a desire to read more of the past winners of the Booker. That is a theme you will see crop up throughout the rest of this haul. This is a book set in post-colonial Australia. It's an adventure novel. It's been turned into a film that I'll be able to watch after if I am so inclined. And I love a good literary adventure, something that is really plotty but still very well written. Then I think we trekked across the city centre to go from one Oxfam bookshop to another Oxfam bookshop, and in there I found a couple more books that took my fancy. The first of those was All the Pretty Horses by Cormac McCarthy, who sadly passed away earlier this year. I have not read much Cormac McCarthy. I do really want to read The Road. I think I've got that on my Kindle. And I have read No Country for Old Men, but I read it when I was 15 or 16. So getting on for 20 years ago. I think it was the first book that the style really sort of struck me as something bold and different. And you got to contextualize that as me being 15 and having not read much. But it was the first book I'd ever read without quotation marks around the speech. And so I was like, oh my God, how can you tell when they're speaking or not? Turns out it's fine. And it's quite an interesting way to, make the narrative flow and make you question what's inside a character's head and outside a character's head. I'm actually quite a big fan of no quotation marks now, which is potentially a controversial opinion. I don't know tons about this book. I think it's a Western where they're traveling across the country, and I'm seeing here now that it is the first of a trilogy, so if I like it, there is lots more to turn to. The other one I found was Isabella Hamad's first novel, The Parisian, and I read Enter Ghost earlier this year, and I liked it, but I didn't love it, but I could definitely see that Hamad was a talented writer, and so I was intrigued to read more from her. This is about a Palestinian man who leaves Palestine in 1914 to go and study in France and then falls in love with his tutor's daughter. It's quite a chunky book, but I think a chunky book well done is sometimes my absolute favourite. So looking forward to getting to this at some point. Our final charity bookshop was the Amnesty Bookshop, which was really cool. It was a TARDIS. It was so much bigger inside than it looked from the outside. And there was clearly someone in York who was involved in publishing somehow, because there were so many proofs on the shelves. I didn't pick up any of those, though. I went for a book that had kind of been on my periphery for a while and seemed perfect for spooky season. It was one that I was going to be able to read over Halloween, and that was Hex by Jenny Fagan. And I have indeed already read this. This is about a woman who in the 21st century communes back to spend time with a woman in the 1600s as she is awaiting execution for being a witch. And I will say much more about this when I properly review it, but I definitely thought it was a great read. And who can resist a lovely French flap? They get me every time. Then, to finish off the day, we went back to Waterstones. We'd originally met at the start of the day in Waterstones, but we didn't really get too much time to look around, so we came back to Waterstones at the end, and I picked up a couple of books that I'd had my eye on. One was Jamaica Kincaid's Annie John. I've heard just amazing things about Jamaica Kincaid. I didn't really know where to start, so I googled where to start with Jamaica Kincaid, and a few different sources said Annie John is a really good one to kick off with, and it is very short, so sort of minimal time investment to see if you love her prose as much as everyone else does. And my other pickup was another of these like Picador classics. It was Jackie Kay's Trumpet. I had not really given this book any thought whatsoever, but I was kind of having a look at it on one of the display tables, and Claire Fenby, who is a booktuber, said that it's one of the best books she has ever read, and it just absolutely convinced me that I should pick this up. I don't know anything about this. I assume there's a trumpet involved, but that's the extent of my knowledge. But for some reason, I am like deliriously excited to read this. So I think out of all of the books that I'm showing today, this is one that I'm going to read sooner rather than later. I think I just love the idea of a book that I have never heard of coming out of nowhere and being an absolute stonking good read. But yeah, let me know if you've read that one and would recommend it. We'll move on now to some books that I have paid full price for, brand new books rather than charity shop finds. Starting with the inevitable Sally Rooney. I picked up a copy of Intermezzo. I got this from a supermarket. It was half price. I have no qualms about that, especially for a book that's had such a huge marketing budget and has been so successful so quickly. I don't mind buying it from a supermarket. There have been so many reviews and opinions of this on social media already. I have avoided most of them, but I have picked up the general gist that lots of people are calling this Rooney's best book so far, which is amazing really, because it must take a lot to unseat normal people, which I think has a special place in many people's hearts. I do know it is about chess and grief and brothers, and I just love Sally Rooney's writing, so I'm really excited to read this. I think it might be like a Christmas read for me, like a nice, I want to say comfort read, but if it's about grief, it's not going to be super comforting. But yeah, not much more to say about that hasn't already been said. I also nabbed a book for my in-person book club, which is just me and a group of my friends. We are reading Haruki Murakami's Men Without Women. This is translated from Japanese by Philip Gabriel and Ted Goosen. This is one of his short story collections. I think one of the stories, the first one, Drive My Car, has been turned into a movie that people have been raving about. So I am quite excited to read this and then watch the movie. We are meeting about this book in 1 week's time, and I have not started it, and I'm halfway through another book at the moment. So I need to really get on with finishing that book and then cracking through these stories. I think with a short story collection, it might be quite difficult to remember all the nuances of all the different stories, other than like the ones that you really liked and the ones that you really disliked. But we'll see how that goes. Hopefully it'll be interesting. So I had a little me day, a self-care day, where I went to Bath, not to have a bath, to the city of Bath, and had a little wander around the bookshops there, and I spied a book that Mr. B's Emporium were recommending as one of their favourites, which was Hannah Kent's Burial Rites. And the reason this stood out to me is because Matt and I are going on holiday to Iceland next year. Really looking forward to it. And this is a book that is set in Iceland. I've been on the hunt for some reading material to take with me, and I do like to try and read at least one book set in or about the place that I'm going, because it sort of enhances my experience. And so this, I've decided, is going to be coming with me. It is a historical novel about a woman who is accused of murdering her husband, and then she's taken in by another family. I don't know much more than that, but it sounds really interesting. I don't read tons of historical fiction, but this has rave reviews from lots of people who have read it, who told me that it was great. Jennifer from Jennifer Loves Books said it was like a really cracking read. So I think it would be a good one to take away. The next book I got is also one where I was influenced by another booktuber, because after the Booktuber quiz that the Disco King hosted, which was loads of fun, I'll link to that down in the description. It is quite long. We were on for like an hour and a half or 2 hours. I did terribly throughout the entire quiz, and then somehow ended up in a tiebreaker to win at the end. I won't spoil what the outcome of that was, but let's just say the final outcome was very well deserved. But a few of us stayed on to chat after the stream ended, and we got talking about some books that we really enjoyed recently, and the Disco King was raving about Penelope Fitzgerald's Offshore, and I was sold because he's hard to please, and he said this was amazing, and it's another Booker winner. So this is where like the cogs started turning in my head, and I was like, oh, maybe I should just like acquire a bunch of Booker winners, and then I should try and read more of those in 2025. It's a plan that's currently formulating. We will see how that goes. I didn't even look up what this was about, so I'm going to be going into this blind. But I do very much like the cover, and that's something, isn't it? Then I noticed in one of my local indie bookshops, they had a copy of Ben Shattuck's The History of Sound. And that got me immediately excited, because people who I know in the US who have been reading this have been raving about it, saying how great it was. It was one that a lot of people were tipping for the National Book Award this year. It didn't make it, but it still sounded great. This is a set of interlinked short stories, or like pairs of short stories, I think it sounded like. And it also says on the back that this is going to be turned into a movie featuring Paul Mescal and Josh O'Connor. So I think that sounds just peachy. And another just really stunning cover. Like, if this had an ugly cover, I probably wouldn't have been moved to pick it up. I probably would have waited until there was another edition or something. But God's sake, publishers, you're just reeling me in. Speaking of beauty, the next book I'm going to show you is one that I'm like almost unwilling to hold. It is so nice, and it was reasonably expensive. But Fitzcarraldo Editions, which is an indie publisher in the UK, recently celebrated their 10-year anniversary. And as part of that celebration, they created this first decade collection of hardback editions of some of their best fiction and non-fiction books. There are 5 fiction and 5 non-fiction, limited runs of 1,000 of each, and they are numbered and signed by the authors. And they are just exquisitely beautiful objects. And so they recently came in stock at Book House in Bristol, which is maybe my closest indie bookshop. And I went to have a look, and I was just in love as soon as I saw them. The problem was I couldn't decide which one of them I wanted to get, and Book House only had one of each of the books. Septology by Jon Fosse had already been sold, so I couldn't get that, which I was kind of pleased about, because 1, it's massive, and 2, I think it's like 50 quid, that one, because it is so big. So I was deciding between Hurricane Season by Fernanda Melchor, Flights by Olga Tokarczyk, and The Netanyahus by Joshua Cohen. And I did a little poll on my Instagram. The Netanyahus was paid absolute dust on that poll, but it was really neck and neck between Flights and Hurricane Season. And at the time I went to the shop, Hurricane Season was winning, and I'm not just someone who follows whatever the outcome of a poll is, but I did kind of want to go for that one. So I picked up Hurricane Season, and I don't know if you can see, but it's like a cloth-bound hardback book. It's got this really nice belly band, which has not cheap cardstock, which is nice. But the real like amazing part of this is those sprayed edges that go all the way around. I'm not always a massive fan of sprayed edges, but I think those are just absolutely beautiful, and they carry over into the end papers, and the end papers are like the pages that are stuck to the backboard, but also the first page. And it's just really really beautiful. I was so excited to get this home and a little bit scared to unwrap it. Actually, it was in cellophane and I was worried about damaging the book when I was trying to cut it. What also came with the book, which was pretty cool, were some goodies. So you got like a little card to commemorate the first decade collection, so I could use that as a bookmark perhaps. We've got this really stunning tote in Fitzcarraldo editions blue, and I got like this this rather large pin badge, which I think is pretty nifty. It does remind me a little bit of a badge I had when I was in primary school, when I was like a team captain for one of the teams. We used to have like a house point system, so I had to wear that on my tie. I don't know where I will put a pin badge, but you best believe I will find something to do with it. So yeah, that was my like biggest indulgence of the last 3 months, but I think very well worth it. If that was too indulgent for you, then let's return to the charity shop finds, and I've got a bunch to talk through. The first one is one that came up when I was chatting with Bob and Roz in that charity shop in York, which was Unless by Carol Shields, and they were saying that this is just like a really immersive, gripping, emotional read. It's about a woman whose daughter disappears, and then she's basically trying to find out where she's gone and will she return. And each of the chapters starts with just like a random word. I don't even know what sort of word it is. What sort of word is so and nevertheless? But they said those words seem quite random at the start, and then as the book goes on, they become more and more meaningful. So yeah, really interested in this one. Then I got a couple of books that I found in very good condition in charity shops of authors that I've read recently, really enjoyed and want to read more of. So I picked up West by Karis Davis, read Clear last year, I think, maybe. Really liked it, thought it was great. This is an earlier book from Davis. It's a Western. I've really been enjoying Westerns lately when I've read them, and so that sounds great to me. And then I also grabbed Charlotte Wood's The Weekend, and I had seen this promoted in Waterstones, and I don't know why, but it looked like not literary fiction to me. I wasn't drawn to it. I thought it was like light and fluffy. But having now read Stoneyard Devotional, I really loved Charlotte Wood's prose. I loved the way she talked about emotion and reflection and regret. And this book feels like it's very much in that same sort of thematic territory, because it's about 3 friends who come together after their 4th friend in the group dies, and they think about like, why have they remained so close all of these years? And so I have a feeling this might be a hit for me. I also found a 99p copy of Brooklyn by Column to Bean. I don't usually like movie editions. I don't particularly like this cover either, but I do really want to read it. People rave about it. It's about a woman who emigrates from Ireland to New York in the 50s and then has to go back to Ireland for some reason, and is sort of caught between these two worlds. I think my interest in this has been piqued mainly because people have been talking about how great Long Island is, and Long Island is the sequel to Brooklyn. I hope that's not a spoiler about what she chooses to do in the end, but I guess we'll see. And then in the same shop I found a copy of the lovely Penguin English Library edition of Brideshead Revisited by Evelyn Waugh. The reason this is on my radar, I think, is because of the number of people that were saying how the plot of Saltburn, at least like the start of it, or the main body of the film rather than the very end, how much it reflects or seems to be in conversation with Brideshead Revisited, because it's about a boy who meets another boy at Oxford and then goes to stay with his family over the summer. You'll know I'm not a huge reader of classics, but this is one that I would love to tackle, and having read like just the first page, it does sound like it's written in a really engaging way. So, but yeah, it sounds like one I might turn to next year, because more classics is another thing that I'm trying to embrace for 2025. The next group of 5 books is from last week, when Matt had some reason that he needed to go to Cardiff, and I thought, I might as well just come with you, because we've got a 2 together rail card, so save a third on the train, and I'll just potter about, go to some bookshops, see what's up. And of course I ended up splurging, or not really splurging, because all of these are from secondhand or charity bookshops. But I got 5 books, and I will start with Elizabeth Strout, My Name is Lucy Barton. This is the first in the Lucy Barton series, which is that called Amgash or something? I don't know. I recently gave this to a friend for her birthday. Not this exact copy, I bought her a new copy, but it may be something that we read together, or maybe we read for book club. I have read Olive Kitteridge, and I really loved it. I loved Elizabeth Strout's way of writing. I'm interested to see what it's like in like a more conventional novel rather than a novel in stories. People really like this series, so I think it will be a good one. I also grabbed a copy of a book I'd never heard of before, but it is The Dog by Joseph O'Neill, which is about a man who flees New York for some reason to Dubai, and he ends up overseeing his friend's fortune. I was sort of in the mood for this, partly because Matt has been watching the TV show Industry, which is about like investment banking and all that ludicrous nonsense that very rich people get up to. And so I thought, hey, it'd be fun to read about ludicrous nonsense that rich people get up to in a novel. I have heard of Joseph O'Neill because he wrote Netherland, which is about taking cricket to America, and he also wrote the football book that I've forgotten what it's called, Godwin, which was released this year. So I'm very interested in this one. I will admit though, it's probably not going to get to the top of my TBR anytime soon. And then the other 3 books that I got are all part of this emergent book purchasing project to grab as many Booker winners as possible. So I got Kieran Desai's The Inheritance of Loss, which won the Booker in 2006. This is set in the Himalayas, and I will be honest, I don't know anything more than that. I don't believe this is a very well loved winner of the Booker, but you got to read the ones that are less well liked as well as the ones that are really well liked, haven't you? I picked up The Gathering, which is by Anne Enright. This was her Booker winner in 2007, so the year after The Inheritance of Loss. I read The Wren earlier this year, and I didn't love the book, but I did love the writing. And so if this is a book where that writing tells a Booker winning story, then I have very high hopes for this. I think it's going to be pretty special. And then finally, I grabbed J.G. Farrell's Troubles. And this has got a bit of an interesting history in that it was released in the period in 1970 when the rules of the Booker changed, and they changed their eligibility period, and it meant a bunch of books were not eligible for the Booker simply because they were not released within the eligibility window for the 1969 prize or the 1970 prize. However, there was a special Booker put on, I think in 2010, by the Booker Prizes, where they got some judges to select a long list, a short list, and a winner of books that would have been eligible but were not because of the rule changes, and it was called the Lost Man Booker Prize, and it was won by J.G. Farrell and this book, Troubles. It's set in Ireland in the early 20th century. It's supposed to be quite humorous, and I often see both this and J.G. Farrell's other more legitimately Booker winning The Siege of Krishnapur often held up as some of the best Booker winners ever. So yes, I am excited to read this, although I will say the print quality is not amazing. You probably can't see this, but it's got those, quite thick, smudgy typeset that a lot of old books tend to have. And I love a crisp page, We'll finish off with some books that I've been very kindly gifted by publishers. The first book is actually 3 books, because the lovely folks at Vintage sent me the entire trilogy of the Car over Knausgaard series, which starts with The Morning Star. Who's that translated by? Martin Aitken translated it. So yeah, there's 3 very hefty books in this series so far. I don't know if it's due to carry on and there be more in the series. I know the My Struggle series was 6 volumes, so maybe he's got some more planned here. This is a slightly speculative fiction book where a bright star suddenly appears in the sky and weird stuff starts to happen. I remember when this first came out and there was quite a lukewarm reaction to it, but as the series has had more books, I just hear people absolutely raving about it, and so I am so intrigued. So yeah, there's The Morning Star, then the second one is The Wolves of Eternity, and the third one, which has only just come out, is The Third Realm. And I think these editions are all stunning. I love that they've reissued the paperbacks in this new design, because I think they're all really nice, and it's lovely to have a set. And they included some Hotel Chocolat dark chocolate in the packet. So I think I'm going to save that for when I start the Morning Star. But yeah, really looking forward to it. Then I've got a couple of 2025 releases from the lovely people at the Indigo Press. They gave me these when I went to the book launch for the memoir, The Museum of Lost and Fragile Things, which came out a little bit earlier in the year. But yeah, these are two that they're really excited about that are coming in 2025. So in February, they are releasing I Hope You're Happy by Marnie Appleton. And this is a short story collection. And what kind of sells this to me is what it says on the blurb. So it says, everyday experiences of friendship, family, dating, and desire catapult the reader into a creepy vortex of horror. And who doesn't want to be in a creepy vortex of horror? It doesn't give horror vibes on the cover, but it does give like strange and uncanny, and I have a feeling there might be like some humor in this as well. So yeah, this comes out in February, and then in April is the release of Calls May Be Recorded for Training and Monitoring Purposes by Katarina Volkmar. And this is another one where the cover is giving humour because this is a blow-up doll wearing a call centre headset. And this is set in a call centre and it's about a man and the conversations he has with the people who call his call centre in London. I think the vibe of this is summed up best by the very first line. So it starts, if you're going to shit yourself, it's most likely to happen on your own doorstep. I guess that's a new fear unlocked. Yeah, this comes out on the 1st of April. And then the final batch of books are ones that I picked up at an event I went to recently, which the lovely peeps at Serpent's Tail and Granta invited me to, which was like a debut author spotlight event. And there were 4 authors that were giving readings and having short little interviews about books that they had coming out in 2025. And there were a couple of other proofs on offer there as well. I will rattle through these quite quickly just because you can't really do anything with these just yet. But if any of them do interest you, then pre-orders always really help out authors, especially debut authors, because it generates quite a bit of buzz. The first book is A Room Above a Shop by Anthony Shapland. This is obviously not the final cover. This is just like what Granta proofs look like. This is set in rural Wales, and it's about 2 men who, I guess, develop a bit of a romance. It's told in these little vignettes, and it was really interesting to hear from Anthony about like how he basically wrote lots and lots of scenes and then had to arrange them into a narrative, and that was his process. Something that's quite interesting about this is that the 2 main characters are called B and M, which are mine and Matt's initials, and Matt is Welsh, so maybe this is going to be like reading my own life. I suspect not. Oh, and it comes out in March next year. Then we have Lush by Rochelle Dowden Ward. This comes out in May, and this is a book about a group of people who go to Italy in order to drink the world's oldest bottle of wine. I love that for a concept. I can't believe it hasn't been done before. And during the reading, Rochelle read out a part that was talking about how like the words you use to describe the different flavours of wine, like things like leather and fertiliser. I don't think fertiliser is a real one. But anyway, you use these words that don't, like, it doesn't actually taste like leather, but it's used as like a proxy word so that you can agree that you're talking about the same thing. And I love that as something to be explored in fiction, because when you think about it, like, emotions are the same thing. I mean, you could go as far as to say all words are the same thing. But yeah, it sounds like a really interesting jumping off point to explore wine and emotion and the bridge between them. And then the book I picked up, which I think I'm probably most excited about, just in terms of how much it aligns to my own personal reading tastes, and that is Saraswati by Gurneet Jahal. This is a book about efforts to unearth a holy river that some people thought was a myth, but then it is found. It's told in 7 parts, and the characters from each part are all like distant relatives, so they have the same ancestors, which has a nice resonance with sort of the theme of rivers and how they split and divide and come back together. This one's not out until June, but I have a feeling there may be quite a lot of excitement about this. There was another author at the event who spoke, and I thought I picked up a copy of her book, but it turns out the book I picked up was not that one. It was a non-fiction called Second Skin, which is about fetish culture, which, to be honest, is not something I would usually read about. I don't read tons of non-fiction anyway, and it's very provocative, but I think for people into transgressive non-fiction, I think it'd be a really, really good read. The book I thought was that, but which I picked up instead, is actually a novel called Beartooth by Callan Wink. This is another proof. It's not out until February, and this is something I don't know much about. And just picking this up from the blurb right now, it's about two brothers who go on a poaching trip in Yellowstone. So maybe some like Western vibes. I did look this up on Goodreads, and I think it's got quite a good rating from early readers. So yeah, interested in this. And then there were two more authors that couldn't be there, but they played videos of them just talking a little bit about their books. The first one is Shape of an Apostrophe by Uttama Kirit Patel. This is about a woman who is pregnant but living with her in-laws, and her mother-in-law basically interferes with every aspect of her life. And what they likened it to was Burnt Sugar by Avni Doshi, which I really liked, so that's a good sign for me. And it says on the back that it's also like Claire Kilroy, and I, as you know, loved Soldier Sailor, so I think this could be a really good read. The other one, and the final book of this book haul, is This Is a Love Story by Jessica Sofa. This is set in New York, and it's about a couple who have been married 50 years, and the wife is seriously unwell, and then the couple together reflect on their time together, and it's about love in all of its forms, and it sounds like it could be a really beautiful read. I quite like the way that it's laid out on the page as well. It seems quite vignette-y in terms of like the paragraphs and the white space. So I imagine it might be a read that will just like whisk you away and you'll sort of blink and have read half of it. That one comes out in February. Oh, and I should say The Shape of an Apostrophe comes out in April. That's all for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, then hitting the like button is a great help as always. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books, or you would recommend me turning to some of them sooner rather than later, or if you are excited about any of the upcoming releases that I showed for 2025. If you're not subscribed and you'd like to see more from me, then hit the subscribe button. But until next time, toodles.